Hello, and welcome to the Narrowing Path, Walking the Spiritual Walk. My name is Steve Van Eiderstein, and thank you all for joining me again for another episode of this podcast. Today, we're going to be going over the chapter 10 reading we did 2 weeks ago. I apologize for the delay in a post again. I was actually quite sick last weekend, so focused on getting well first. And this week's review, though, is something very near and dear to me in a lot of ways, because it's a direct reflection of my own personal experience and the part of my own journey with spirituality. So it's going to be a fun one for me to talk about today. I'm really looking forward to it. So the book we're going through right now is, get it in focus a little bit here. See, maybe put it in front of my face. There you go. I Was a Pagan by V.C. Kitchen. All right. This is the one I read out of, but this is literally that's the original. This is the one I do the reviews from. It is it's a facsimile reprint. I always say this just to make sure everyone knows we're on the same page in case it's your first time, which is literally just a picture of the pages of the original book in printing. So I'm very excited about it. So here we go. Let's go ahead and we'll get into this chapter. And this chapter is this starts off with it. The title is Starting in School Again, right? So it's something many people do once they get into recovery or they start their spiritual journey, whatever that might look like, however that might be phrased, or the terminology they might need to use for that. And it involves some sort of re-education, or the subtitle to this is education. And what happens is when you go from living a selfish, self-centered life to a spiritual life, everything's got to change, right? It's a complete re-education in all ways. Absolutely everything gets a shift in perspective. And like I said, for myself, this is very, very relevant to my experience. This is very relevant to where I am right now in my life, because not only have I had to go through the non-institutional type of re-education with the learning different ways to look at life, learning different ways to how to handle things, learning how to interact with people, learning just how to live a whole different way. That's when I got into recovery. But also I'm literally in the process of getting a college education and changing careers. So this chapter is something I can talk about and have direct experience with and relate to quite a bit. So, so even if you're not necessarily going back to college, not necessarily going back into any formal educational institution, right? This chapter can apply to literally everybody, because when you begin to change perspective, you get to reinterpret everything you've ever known. And that reinterpretation is a brand new education in and of itself, right? So you have this opportunity to gain all of this knowledge from that shift in perspective. So it really opens up an entirely new venue to learn through. So it was blessing for me, that's for sure. So I like the way he introduces the chapter, so I want to read that. For those who have the book and want to follow along, it's on page 137, the opening page of the chapter. And it's the second paragraph on it that I wanted to read. Education, I had always thought, is or should be a preparation for the business of life. What I did not see, however, was the threefold nature of this business. I did not see that we are living not only to survive or get along in the physical universe, but also to get along with other people and to get along with God. I saw only the survival part. I wanted to get along in the physical universe with the greatest glory to myself and the greatest financial gain. And if that's not an exact representation of how I used to live. It's interesting because he brings in three different dynamics to it, right? There's the getting along in the survival way. Like, I need to exist. I need to live. I need to make sure I'm able to exist in this world, this physical world. But there's the existence with other people and the existence with God, like getting along with them, right? So, and I wasn't, how to say it? I wasn't good at the last two. I didn't even know the last two really existed, if I'm honest with you. Which I know seems ridiculous, but it's the truth. I really just was out for myself, and not because thought I was better than everyone else necessarily, but because I thought that's how everyone thought. Because I believed everyone was doing the exact same thing. Everyone was only acting in ways that would best serve themselves and would allow them to live the most comfortable and pleasure-filled life without care or concern. I thought that was the reason to get through life or to take any action. That was the motivating factor. So when he talks about, but also to get along with other people, I kind of considered that maybe, I guess, in retrospect, to actually look back and to say, of course, there was other people. I had to figure out how to engage with them. But most of the time, I thought of people as objects and transactional. Like, I do this for you, you give me that, you give me this, I do that. It was never a relationship development type of dynamic that would happen. So I might have had a hint of getting along with other people, but not enough to say I was fully aware of it, I would say. And then that last one, and to get along with God, that was, I didn't even know if that was what that would. If you had told me that, I wouldn't have understood anything you were talking about. To be fair, I would have brushed it off and called you stupid and moved on. I was a very judgmental and condemning person for a very long time, and to read this and to now look at my experience of being in recovery and seeing what actually matters and what really is valuable in this world and what helps me get through this life and what is my priorities now, it's just amazing to actually see the difference. So I really enjoyed the way he opened that up, because it was a revelation to me. The ability to do anything but just serve myself was not really anything I would think of. I would entertain the idea that, hey, maybe someone is. I would entertain the idea that, hey, maybe that's a different way to live. But then I would quickly dismiss it, because there's just no way it was true in my mind. There was no way that people could be genuinely altruistic. Everyone was doing it for their own selfish gain, whether financially or through prestige and fame, or just they did it to make themselves look and feel good. They did it for their own self-satisfaction. And so it was never genuine to me. And then he goes into talking about the actual educational system, and in that first line, education, I always thought should be a preparation for the business of life. And I think that too. I agree with that. And I think I've always thought about that. And I've always agreed with that type of a statement, right? But the problem is if I believe that, but only serve myself, I believe education is solely intended to help you learn to manipulate the world and to get what you need out of the world and get what you want out of the world. It's not an actual education for any good reason, but to be employed to serve you in selfish and self-centered ways. And that's all I used it for, right? So I thought all schools should be focused around that. All schools should be focused around me getting what I need out of the world, because that was as far as I got, And the thing is, there's many schools have actually kind of catered to this now. This line of thinking, schools have college institutions, high schools, the concept of spirituality, not even religion, not even God, we're not even going to go that far. I'm talking about just general, spirituality and the practice of spiritual principles and virtues and things like that, right? All of that's kind of getting stripped out of public schools, at least out of the majority of the population's education. It's coming down and getting whittled down to things that could just serve you in a selfish way. Things to validate yourself, things to help you make more money, things to help you just, there's no principle of moral and ethical correctness really being taught to say this is how these things can be better implemented, not just for yourself, but for society, but for the service of a God of your understanding, right? So the school and educational system, at least here in the United States, is really becoming centered around and encouraging this soul dimension of we're only here to help you get what you need to take out of the world. And it doesn't even do it that well, if I'm honest with you. It doesn't really effectively do that. So the schools system really helps you get educated so you can get a job, so you can make money, so you can have safety and security, so you can live a comfortable and pleasurable life. So everything about it revolves around you, right? Well, for me, it's I'll keep it on myself. I'll speak from my own personal perspective, I guess. Everything I did in that, so I got educated so I could get a job, so I can make money, so I have safety and security, so I can live comfortable and a pleasurable life, right? That's just me thinking about me and what I want, what's best for me. And then anything else, if I can even consider anything else, comes secondary. That's a very vain and egotistical and prideful way to live. But that's 99.9% of the education being provided today is based around that. It is encouraging that type of thinking. It is trying to get people to actually be more selfish, more self-centered. It's actually breeding this narcissistic self-image and self-consideration that is really being a detriment to the world. And at least it was a detriment to me. And I like how he talks about, he mentioned it. If there was any school that could have taught me to be an engineer, right, or advertised by moral means or moral motives, if there was any institute which controlled its practical technique by means of spiritual technique, I missed that lesson or missed finding that school, right? So yeah, I'll say this. I either missed that lesson or I missed that school, right? And maybe I just sought out a selfish and self-centered school because that's how I was, right? Maybe I missed the community portion of it or the spiritual portion of my education because I wasn't. I was just self-absorbed. I don't know. That could be completely possible. But the reality is probably both happened. I absorbed it because I was self-centered. And then I was self-centered. I probably missed any moral teaching that they might have actually gone along or interwoven into the education. But I took from it what he took from it too, right? He took from it, from his education. There's no real nice way to say it. I'll just say it. He used his education and his understandings from science and history and all of these things to learn how to manipulate people better, to get out of them what he wanted to get out of them, right? Like it's completely selfish and self-serving, right? The entire advertising industry does this, right? To manipulate our animalistic instincts and animalistic emotions to try to get us to a point to make us behave in a certain way. This can be done through music, through colors, through imagery, through subliminal messages, through so many things they've learned they can actually manipulate us with. And that's what he said he learned how to do, was actually use his education to take advantage and manipulate other people. And that's not how this is supposed to go, guys. That's not what we're supposed to be learning to do here. We're supposed to be, now, I know, becoming of service to the God of our understanding and those in our community. We're supposed to be adding to this world instead of taking from this world. And that's kind of lost. That's lost in the educational system today, I think. It's lost in the underpinning moral structure of the education system, at least, like I said, at least here in the United States. And I think it's probably more widespread than just here. But I'll speak from the experience I've had and I observe. And VC Kitchen goes in to talk about, it didn't even cross his mind to genuinely help others. It didn't even cross his mind to use these things in a positive way for other people, you know. And the thing is, he goes into it being a directionless life, you know. James Allen talked about this too, you know. Let me see. It was, he talked about, it was in As a Man Thinketh, and we went over it in the part about vision and ideal, right? And purpose. He talks about how you have to set your ship's sails and rudder to a direction. You have to know where you want to go, because without that, it just is a path of destruction. You'll end up shipwrecked or marooned, or a disaster will hit you, because all you're doing is going adrift. You have no direction. You're not making any headway. It's just a constant, aimless struggle of existence at that point, which is unfortunately true. When all you do is live to serve yourself, when you get to a point where your needs are genuinely met, you know how to do that. You know, what do you do next? Suddenly it's a meaningless, hollow existence, right? And it's aimless. And it becomes so self-destructive and destructive to those around you too. And I probably just hit the mic with my watch. But here's a quote from it. As an educated man without Christ at his center is, as I know now, like a ship loaded with valuable cargo, but not going anywhere, or else headed with more certain, or else headed the more certainly and swiftly for destruction. Now, excuse me. So you've got all of these gifts, you've got all of this knowledge, you've got all of this ability, these skill sets, these aptitudes you've developed, right? All of this amazing stuff that we get to go through and be a part of. And you're just using it for your own selfish ways, right? It's just like rots your soul, right? It's and he says here, right, because the ideal he's talking about working towards is a Christ-centered life, or a Christ-like character, right? Like trying to model your behavior after Jesus Christ, trying to use the things in your life as God would have you, use them, right? So without Christ at its center, as I know now, a ship loaded with valuable cargo but not going anywhere, or else headed more certainly and swiftly for destruction, right? All of these things are just going to be wasted and destroyed, and you're going to end up in a place, even if you have material gain and stability, right? Like, even if you don't destroy everything material-wise, and you actually become very successful materially, the hole you'll feel and the lack of fulfillment and the lack of that spiritual contentment out of life will still be there, right? And it will lead to certain destruction. You know, earlier on in this book, he just talked about how he would live and how miserable he was and how he treated people and how he was constantly just the victim of his own desires and whims, and how miserable of a life that was, right? That's a whole perspective to keep in mind here. So, and he talks about too how he was a very well-educated person. Like he talks about his experiences and all the plays he did, the schools he went to, the things he sold, the industries he's worked in, and none of it really made a difference. He never actually felt like it was a benefit to him. He never felt like it was he had learned much more than living for himself in any of that, right? It was always something, just another way to serve himself, to get what he wants, to just draw blood from the stone of life a little bit more. And it just would fail him repeatedly. And he really makes it a point to stress that, like, none of that actually matters, right? Like, if none of that is used in the proper way, if you don't have the proper orientation and education to life, and you don't have the proper direction and ideal set and vision for yourself, none of it matters. If the real education comes from being of service. The real education comes from learning to get along with others, as he says, learning to get along with God, and taking those qualities, those things that we've accumulated, those experiences, the knowledge, the talents, the skills, all of that, the material possessions even, and putting those into the service of something greater than yourself and doing it for the right reasons. It's not always going to be, especially in the beginning, for the right reasons, but eventually you'll become accustomed to actually doing the right thing for the right reason because it's the right thing to do, rather than I'm going to do this so I feel better about myself, right? That selfishness can get woven in there pretty easily. But he talks about how that is the only real education that is worth actually mentioning and worth using those faculties for. So, and how much that a spiritual education really has an impact. So I'm going to read from page 141 right now. I'm going to read the first third of the paragraph I have, and then the last sentence too. Now I'm not going to read the whole thing. So it says, I have in fact learned more about the real business of living in 4 days at an Oxford Group School of Life than in any 4 years of my previous history. That is because it is a school in which God is the instructor and human teachers are but his instruments. And he said a couple more things. Finally, it is a school, and the only such school I know, which enters effectively into that third department of living, which ushers us into the presence of God and which teaches us how to live and grow there. Isn't that amazing? Right? To say that, give that comparison from a man that's so well traveled and had so many experiences as he's had, to be able to say, hey, I've learned more in 4 days working with the Oxford Group than I ever did in any 4-year period of my life. That's substantial, right? That's quite a dramatic comparison. And I love how he says, there's a school, and the only school such I know, which enters effectively into the third department of living, which ushers into the presence of God, which teaches us how to live and grow there, right? To actually be of service to God is what he's talking about here, and actually use his blessings to actually be of service to that God and others, actually, you could extend it to. And he says that is because it is a school in which God is the instructor and human teachers are but his instruments, right? So it's people taking their experience and their understandings and their practice of contact with a God of their understanding and spiritual living and spiritual principles and living on a spiritual basis and giving that to other people, not to make them dependent on themselves, but to make them, to give them the tools to actually live a God-centered life instead of a self-centered life, right? So it's a school that takes the ego out of it. It's a school that provides an education on how to leverage things to better the world rather than to just better yourself, to serve God instead of just serve yourself, right? It's a whole different perspective, a whole different concept, a whole different opportunity for him to actually do these things. And he just raves about it as he goes through, and he realizes that God should be the primary focus of all education, right? Having an understanding of how to be of service to God and having an understanding of how to be of general and genuine help to your community and to the world and the people in it, should be the primary focus of everything that you learn. To not just use it to leverage for your own self-interest, but to use it to better the world that you're in, to use it to be of service to God, right? To use it and grow in knowledge and understanding. And it's just interesting that he brings this part up, because in you'll have a lot of conversations when you get into this way of living, right? Into a spiritual lifestyle or a recovery lifestyle, right? Where you start learning about spirituality and living a spiritual lifestyle and start to learn about God and start to learn about different practices and what the priorities in life really truly should be and how to maintain pursuing those. And right, you start to experience this freedom from living differently. You start to experience this joy and this contentment that you might not have known was possible, right? You get all this, life starts to change in ways you didn't really think was possible for someone like you. At least this is how it worked for me. And when that happens, you realize everything you knew was wrong. And you have to go through this re-education process that we've been talking about. And then suddenly you have at least a conceptual understanding or a knowing that this is real. A knowing that living spiritually and actually pursuing this way of life is the way you were supposed to live, right? And then when you find that and realize you could have used this years ago, you could have benefited if you were taught this years ago, right? You want to go give it to the world. And it's funny that he brings this up because so many people, like I've talked to many people in 12-step recovery groups that are like, everyone needs a 12-step program. Everyone needs to learn this and do this. If everyone in the world did this, the world would be a better place. And that is true. Right? I do agree that there needs to be some more spiritual education out there. There needs to be some recentering on the focus of education and the focus of why people are living, right? Like it's not all about you. It's not all about me. It's not all about what I can take out of this life through force and a crowbar, right? Like there's so much more that goes into this. And everyone should have this spiritual practice that I've found, right? Whether I've seen people do this with yoga. I've seen people do this with Buddhism. I've seen people do this with religion, like Christianity. I've seen people do this. We have 12-step programs. So many things. And the unfortunate truth is everyone has to go through their own journey. Everybody has to take those actions and have that experience that they need to have to drive them to a place to accept the fact that they aren't the most important person in the world, right? There's a lot of suffering that usually has to come ahead of accepting a spiritual way of living, and then accepting the truth of that spiritual way of life is a whole nother stage you have to go through, right? So as much as I like, and I love that he talks about it, right? That the sole focus of all education should be around a God-centered influence, right? To be the purpose to implement these different areas of life for to work for God. And remember, I'm always talking about the God of your understanding, whatever that looks like for you, with the universe, the nature, source, power, energy, Allah, Buddha, whatever, whoever it is you want to serve, um, the VC Kitchen talks about making everything centered around that and focused around that. That's what all education should be. I love that, and I think it's great. It's a beautiful ideal, but the reality of it is, everyone has to go through their own thing. VC Kitchen even had to go through his own painful experience, and who would have? Who's to say that if he had gone to this school of God-centeredness, if he would have suffered any less, if not more, maybe. So I say that because he seems like one of those excited people who have found a new sense of freedom and want to give it to the world, and which I commend, and that's what I want to do too. That's part of why I do this, is to share that experience that is possible for those open to receive that message. But we have to allow people to have the experience that they're having too. So I did want to read one of the parts of that, though, where the principles of the Oxford Group School of Life extended to other institutions of learning than applied religion or the application of God in all of life's activities, situation, and relationships would become the backbone of each curriculum, right? And he talks about how if it was economics, it would look like this. If it was practice of I don't even know. It's so many: history, sociology, psychology. Psychology would seek not simply to apply aptitudes in choosing a vocation, but to apply the pleasure experience of surrender, pleasure experience in quotes, to God as a motive in following these vocations. Political science would teach the sovereignty of God's will, replacing human desire as the basis of good government. Philosophical, religious studies would jump to life and become a mainspring in living rather than a mere calisthenic of the mind, right? So, like all of this stuff, all of these areas of life that we emphasize and we ask that people study and go through, right? All of it would get repurposed and would be repurposed in a way to be of service to God and the community. And it's really cool to read it. And it's really cool to hear the energy he has around it, right? Like, this is what education really should be about. And I do want to comment, though, he did bring in the physical education, and this is I bring this up because many people rephrase that. I needed a different perspective for taking care of my physical health. Now that might sound weird, right? Like, well, I want to take care of my physical health so I'm healthy, right? That's good. But as weird as this is going to sound, that's still a selfish way to do it, right? I want to look good. I want to do this. I want to do that, right? So he talks about it, though, how physical education and the importance of maintaining your physical body and keeping it in tip-top shape. I think he actually used the word tip-top. Top-notch, actually. Is to make sure you have a body that's prepared to be of service, right? It's to make sure you have a body that's actually healthy and can be leveraged to be of action, of service to God of your understanding, to be able to help other people with the use of that body, right? So taking care of yourself physically is actually an act of service to God and others, to make sure you're actually sticking around and you're in good health to help them if they need help, to share God's message, whatever that might be, right? It's a beautiful way to actually think about it, because there's that debate out there, and it's not a debate actually, that movement that says self-care is not selfish and blah, blah, blah. And the reality of it is the way a lot of people talk about self-care, it is selfish. It's people just practicing indulgence of all types to escape a world that they don't want to be a part of anymore. But I mean, there is some healthy self-care practices, but those are the ones of like practice of meditation, a practice of exercise, those things that actually improve the quality of your own personal life to help you continue to do your job effectively and to be of service to your employer and your coworkers and your customers and everything else that might go along with that, or to be of service to God, right? So self-care is anything you practice to enable yourself to continue to be of service to those around you, right? It's not binge watching Netflix for 2 days and be like, I'm self-care, I'm just escaping from the world. That's not healthy. We all know that's not healthy, right? We all know playing video games from 5 p.m. on Friday night to 2 in the morning Sunday night, just binging on it, right? Or drinking just to get that pleasure feeling. It's those indulgences are not self-care. They're escaping. They're potentially addictions even, right? Self-care is the things you do to care for the different aspects of your body, your mind, your spirit, your soul, your mental health, to help you be able to come back healthier, to be of service. So anything that is an act of service to those parts of you, so you continue to be a healthy individual, to be of service to God and others. That's what the self-care thing is, right? And that's what taking care of this physical body, why it's important. Because I need to be able to be physically fit enough and active enough to be able to be of service for whatever that might be. It's very important. So that's just something I wanted to bring into this conversation, because I think it's an important one. And then the next part he goes into here is talking about people that when they started this lifestyle and they started having a life of recovery, they changed. They began to ask for guidance on where to go to school, where to find the money, what things to study. And I found this very, very interesting, because my personal journey, and just to share a little bit about me, I don't think it'll matter too much. I'm in school to be a social worker right now. I don't know if I've said that on this podcast before, but that wasn't my first choice. I wanted to do something that was going to make me tons of money. Social work isn't going to be that. I understand it. But this is it's a path that I feel like I've been directed to through a practice, through spiritual practice of prayer and meditation and conversation and reading and all of these other things, that I've ended up in this place where I'm going to be a master social worker. And it wasn't my intention. And I believe it's where I'm supposed to be, regardless of whether or not I like the pay rate or not. And VC Kitchen goes into a part of this where he talks about, like, once in his school or college, moreover, the guided student finds the right selection of studies, and he finds greater ability to study, which I've been very good at school just because I had a capability to retain information as long as I heard it, and I was smart enough to just put things together to pass with relatively decent grades, but college was a little bit more difficult for me, first of all, because I was drinking and I was drugging, but I just didn't have the focus. I didn't care about it. I didn't stick with it. I failed out of college a couple of times, actually, before this time around. So when I got into school this time around, what I found is, you can, some people would attribute it to just maturity. Some people attribute it to sobriety. It could, and I think all of those play a factor in a certain measure. But he talks about here the right selection of study. He finds greater ability to study, a certain sharpening of the mind, such as I have tried to describe it in my own experience. He finds himself able to attack the most intricate studies and to master subjects that have always been a bugbear, things that have always bothered me. Writing papers I've hated, reading textbooks I've hated, history I've hated, and ethics or morals or research papers, I hated it. But in my current studies, I'm not sure I like it, but they are not as taxing as they used to be. I find myself in possession of the ability to do them well and efficiently and effectively in a way that I don't always, sometimes I still do, but I don't always get extremely stressed about them. I handle things much, much better now. And I take that as a sign that I'm actually in the area of study and doing the things I'm supposed to be doing, because it's coming to me in a more natural way. And so I find it very validating, I guess is maybe the word, confirming maybe, or to read that here, because that's been my exact experience. I've taken the next steps. I've followed the path that's been laid before me, and I've found myself in a place that I never thought I'd possibly be in, and one that in completing degrees, I never thought I'd have any interest in having a college degree, actually, when I first entered into recovery and sobriety. So it's amazing some of the stuff he talks about in this. So then he moves into some people, when they get into this life, it's not a matter of necessarily going back to a formal educational institution, but a re-education of our perceptions and understandings and the way we live life, and to take new perspective and apply it to our life in such a way that we learn all of these new things, right? Where we learn all of these new practices, these new, like take a situation and apply a different perspective, and you learn, right? Like, so you're able to actually just shift it just that little amount and actually get a whole vast wealth of knowledge out of something. And so he talks about it from his perspective, and about how he still is going through this re-education process, even though he didn't go back to school formally. He's using everything that he's learning and reapplying it to the knowledge he already has. So, and I'm going to just read this. It's on 145. God today is teaching me directly through my daily quiet hour in the morning, and indirectly through passages in the Bible that he indicates through the books he guides me to read, through the group meetings and schools of life he guides me to attend, through the rich experiences he leads me into, and through the difficulties he uses to develop my moral fiber. So, a couple of things I want to talk about there, though, is, first of all, he mentions the quiet hour in the morning, right? My daily quiet hour in the morning. And that's something Emmett Fox talks about. That's something James Allen talks about. That's something many people talk about in their spiritual practice, is this hour in the morning where they're just quiet, where they listen, where they contemplate, where they are open to suggestion, maybe is a way to say it, where they, in their 12-step practice, it's a conscious contact with the God of their understanding, where it's a listening and a conversation, maybe. And that's such an important thing. I mean, I mentioned it on the end of the reading that it's something I need to get better about doing. Devoting that first full hour of contemplation to a God of my understanding My ego's telling me it's a huge investment, but I know spiritually it's something I need to be doing. It's something I need to practice and put into an, an effective practice as soon as possible. Because this is where guidance comes from. Like everyone says, every spiritual teacher that I've read anything about, that hour in the morning is where the magic happens. It's where the guidance happens. Now, maybe I'll be completely transparent. That sounds like a selfish thing for me to say, and I guess it is. But if I want to actually get closer and to seek more guidance, to actually seek the potential that I have in this world, it's something I'm going to need to practice more too. And I would encourage anyone else to start practices. You can start small. You can start with 5 minutes. You can start with 10 minutes. And work up to that full hour, but take that full hour where it's just you and your creator, whoever that might be, that God of your understanding, that power that you tap into, and give yourself the space to listen, to ask. The amount of time I do it, I find so beneficial. And I need to do it more. I have a meditation practice, especially at night too, but I need to do more in the mornings to give me that grounding and to make myself available for guidance. So I guess that's just me having some accountability to y'all. But, and he also talks about how, I've gotten inspiration from so many things like this book, we're going through now, VC Kitchen, I Was a Pagan. No one suggested that necessarily to me. I was interested in knowing what they were reading before the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. What inspired the words that were written in that book, right? That inspired the recovery for millions of people. That's huge. I want to know. And I wanted to read that. And I found this list of stuff they were reading. And I found all of these books that have just enhanced my understanding and spiritual connection with God and this path I'm on, so these messages come through so many different venues, I guess is maybe what I'm trying to say here. And he talks about it, that the indirect communication through passages in the Bible that he indicates, through the books he guides me to read, through the group meetings and schools of life he guides me to attend, through the rich experiences he leads me into, through the difficulties he uses to develop my moral fiber. Through the difficulties he uses to develop my moral fiber. Remember, this is if you're going through a hard time, God doesn't test us. I don't believe that. I believe it's our own ego that's testing us to go back into a selfish, self-centered state of living, right? So commit to your morals, commit to your new way of living, commit to this principled and virtuous lifestyle that you've started to do, and walk through that with your head high, knowing that on the other side of it, and there will be another side of it, you're going to be a stronger person. You're going to be a more refined character afterwards. And that's exciting stuff. Let me tell you, that is exciting to me. Because that's where all of my growth has come from, so that develop my moral fiber leads me into and through the difficulties he uses to develop my moral fiber. It's you can get through anything and become closer to the man that God would, to the person God intended you to be. I'll say it like that. Keep it a little bit more open. And it's just a fantastic thing. So I'm going to go ahead and close this up. And the last paragraph here, right, is really a cool line. It's on 147. And best of all, this education sticks, right? All of this new spiritual education, it's truth. So it sticks with you. And where volumes of human advice and misinformation have poured in one ear and out the other, the guidance of God seems to wrap itself around my backbone, become an integral part of my character. It is an education he has made not only mine, but mine for keeps, right? And it's been my exact experience. Like there's things that I've learned that I'll never forget that were said once, and I've integrated those into the way I live. And what an amazing thing that is. What an amazing thing that is. When I've had so much other stuff poured into me that I couldn't, for the life of me, recall. And it's because this is truth, because spiritual principles and values and spiritual laws and disciplines, that is truth. And the truth resonates with my soul, I think. So, great chapter. I hope y'all enjoyed that as much as I did. And thank y'all for joining me again for this. Again, give us a like, give us a subscribe here on YouTube. You can join us on Facebook, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, whatever you'd like. I think Amazon Music as well. Please don't hesitate to reach out if you'd have any questions about the book, or would like any guidance from some of these chapters or anything like that too. I'd love to have a chat. So next chapter that we'll be going through is chapter 11, This Business of Being Remarried. So look forward to it. So until next time, thanks.